A blessed good morning, honorable members, and those under the sound of my voice.
Change the lives of average every
Lord,
go now.
and his mercy endures forever. For this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. In our Moments of Impact devotional segment, I'll be releasing a prophetic word over our nation today by declaring, rain is coming. There's a story recorded in 1 Kings chapter 18, where the word of the Lord came to the prophet Elijah and told him, go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. During this time in Israel's history, there was a severe famine in the land for 3.5 years. Food was scarce. The economy was at a standstill. People were just barely getting by. So now, this is 3.5 years later, God was now telling the prophet to declare that rain is coming. This rain is coming that God told the prophet to declare. It meant that he was about to shift what was taking place in the land. The rain coming meant that the drought was about to end and the crops were about to grow. The rain coming meant that the economy was about to flourish and rebound again. The rain coming meant that people would be able to start work again, and the economic engines would begin running on all cylinders. Elijah obeyed God and showed himself to Ahab. And immediately afterwards, Elijah said to Ahab, go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of an abundance of rain. Elijah then put his face between his knees and prayed and told his servants to go up now and look towards the sea. The first time the servant went and came back and said, there is nothing. Elijah continued to pray, sent him back the second time. He came back and said, there is nothing. He sent him a third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth time. He came back and said, there is nothing. Elijah continued to pray, and the Bible says, at the seventh time, the word of the Lord came back, that behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea, like a man's hand. And it came to pass, in the meanwhile, that the heavens were black with cloud and wind, and there was a great rain. As our country is set to hear the financial trajectory for the next fiscal year, I want to prophetically declare over the Bahamas today that rain is coming. I want to declare that this rain coming is a sign that the drought is over and the curse of the famine over the land has been broken. This rain coming is a sign of the dry crops that were in our land are about to flourish. This rain coming is a sign that those seeds we have sown as a nation is about to bring forth a harvest. I prophetically declare over our nation today, this is the year of abundant harvest. As a nation, just like Elijah did, God is requiring us to maintain a posture of prayer. Despite what's happening in our country, despite our social ills, despite our challenges, despite the woes, despite the insufficiencies, despite our crime rate being out of control, in not many days hence, that which is now being prophesied, we shall all witness the manifestation. In conclusion, I declare one more time that rain is coming. Can you hear it?
Yes.
I hear the sound of an abundance
Of rain.
of rain. He that hath an ear to hear,
Yeah.
let him hear what the Spirit is saying. See that. Think about on these things.
Amen.
Let us pray. Our gracious and eternal Father, we praise and we exalt your name. To you alone belong glory, honor, wisdom, and power. We pause today, Lord, to thank you for your goodness toward us as a nation. We thank you, Lord, for never giving up on us. We thank you that the plans you have for this nation is to prosper us and not to harm us, but to give us a hope and a future. We thank you today, Lord, for sending rain to our nation. We declare prophetically, Almighty God, that the clouds are black and ready to give forth rain. And so we thank you for ending the drought and breaking the curse of famine over our land. We thank you for causing those dry crops that were in our land to flourish. We thank you, God, for ensuring every economic engine in our country is running on full cylinders. Oh Lord, we recommit our nation to you, and we declare that we will pray and we will seek your face. You said men ought always to pray and not to faint. And so just like Elijah, Lord, we will not stop praying until we see the manifestation of rain in our nation. Give us the fortitude, Almighty God, and the stamina to keep our face between our knees and to maintain a posture of prayer. Help us, Almighty God, to not get weary in well-doing. For your word says, in due season we shall reap if we faint not. And so now, Lord, we pray for our parliamentarians today as they begin the debate on the 24-25 budget. We pray for your guidance. We pray for your direction. We pray for your wisdom upon each of them. We pray, Almighty God, today for clarity and transparency as the budget is presented. May that which is presented benefit all Bahamians, irregardless of their political persuasion. Father, be thou exalted in the proceedings of this honorable house today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let us pray the Lord's Prayer.
Father, who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever.
Amen.
Philip Davis, Chester Cooper, Fred Mitchell, Glennis Hannah Martin, Alfred Sayers, Dr. Michael Darble, Clay Sweeting, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, JoBeth Colby Davis, Ginger Moxie, Mario Boleg, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles LaRota, Pia Glover Rowe, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightbourne, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Jamal Strawn, John Pinder, Marcus Roll, Leon Lundy, Kirk Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightbourne, Leslie Miller Bryce, Leroy Major, Sylvanius Petty, Raquel Bonnaby, Michael Pintard, James Crazy Thompson, Hiram Lewis, Shannon Don Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian White, Kingsley Smith.
Good morning, honorable members, and good morning, Bahamas. Our apologies as we began a little late this morning, but we will get right into the people's business. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
I was just in the process. I was just in the process of seeking to communicate with St. Anne's, and we would wish a slight change in the agenda for tabling documents to come after communications.
We're in
The
agreement.
chair
with-
recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
The opposition is in agreement with that, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member.
And convey my thanks to St. Anne's, Madam Speaker, and I so move, therefore. It's a hopeful start.
Thank you, honorable member. Introduction and swearing of new members. Laying of documents by ministers.
Be moved to after communications, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Statement and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cal Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't think any right-thinking member of our society would not embrace the promise of our inspiration word in inspiring words this morning, that it should rain. And that is raining is to come. And I think we all should be embracing that. Because no doubt all of us would want to see a prosperous and abundant Bahamas for all Bahamians. And I can say it's raining. It's raining. Madam Speaker, it's a great privilege to represent the talented and hardworking Bahamians of Cat Island, Rum Cay, and San Salvador in this honorable House. It is on their behalf and on behalf of Bahamians across all of our islands that today I present our government's annual budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025. The 2024-2025 budget reflects just how far we have come in under 3 years in putting our country's fiscal house in order. In fact, as you will see, we have significantly surpassed international projections. I very much understand why the international projections were cautious. They were cautious because we faced, and in many ways continue to face, very serious challenges. But let me tell you something. It's never a good idea to underestimate Bahamians. When we came into office, the fiscal situation was bleak, with a deficit that was 13.1% of GDP. By the end of the last fiscal year, that had been significantly reduced to 3.8% of GDP. And during this budget communication, I will announce a further reduction. But I don't want to wait to share the bottom line. What is the bottom line? In under 3 years, we have knocked $1 billion off our deficit. And what's important is that we pulled the country back from the brink of exercising fiscal discipline while still putting our compassion for the Bahamian people at the heart of our policies. We could not do otherwise. When we came into office, Bahamians were suffering terribly. Far too many were out of work and in despair. The unemployment rate at that time was 17.6%. We moved fast. We opened up the economy. We partnered with the private sector. We encouraged innovation and new investment in tourism and other sectors. And we worked hard to promote our little special country. The employment rate is now the lowest it's been since 2008 at 8.8%. Another key fiscal measure, the debt to GDP ratio, shows how dire the situation was in 2021. In June of that year, the debt to GDP was 100.4%. 100.4%. That means that the size of our debt was the same size, even a little bigger, than the size of our economy. Once this happens to a country, a cascade of negative consequences can gain momentum, leading to a very grim outcome. We took action to prevent those worst-case scenarios, and the latest debt statistics reflect a debt to GDP ratio of 79.9%, a significant achievement. We know we still have a lot of work ahead of us, but we have come a long way, and our country is finally headed in the right direction. Madam Speaker, shortly, I will lay out in in detail information about our country's current fiscal picture and the outlook for the year to come. It will rain. I will begin with a look at the international and domestic microeconomic conditions, and then turn to our 9-month fiscal performance for the year 2023-2024, our financing activities, and our medium-term debt management strategy. I will then review our nation's credit ratings, our removal from the EU blacklisting, and our new Go Bond Fire e-procurement platform before providing key highlights from our 2024 fiscal strategy report and estimates for revenues and expenditures in the financial year 2024-2025, as well as describing some key revenue and expenditure measures. But first, I want to reiterate the values and the vision behind the policy decisions we have made. We have big ambitions for our country and for the Bahamian people. We are working hard to bring down the cost of living for Bahamians, to create safer communities, to support our entrepreneurs, to strengthen our borders, and to build a more inclusive economy. We are also determined to expand opportunities across our beautiful islands, throughout our archipelago. It's the first time the Bahamas has a prime minister and a deputy prime minister representing Family Islands. We are making the most of it, aren't we? Our core policies, including our initiatives promoting progress for our Family Islands, were articulated in our blueprint for change and were reflected in previous budgets, which are focused on national, economic, and personal security. These goals and policies will be further developed and expanded in the new fiscal year. Madam Speaker, we came into office with the country teetering on the brink of fiscal and economic catastrophes. Tens of thousands of Bahamians hadn't worked in months. Our children had missed more than a year of learning in their classrooms with their teachers and friends. We ended the curfew, the lockdowns, the travel visas, and the emergency orders. We opened up faster and better than competing destinations. And we did it safely by providing the free testing and the free mask, which we had said from the start were a much saner and more humane policy than lockdowns. And we did it by treating nurses and doctors as partners, not adversaries. The rapid transition from one reality to another underscored that values matter. Policy choices matter. But as I said a moment ago, while it is so important to finally be moving in the right direction, there is so much more work to do. Our country's economic recovery hasn't reached everyone yet. I know a lot of Bahamians are still hurting. And the worst global inflation crisis in decades is really hitting our families hard. That's why it is so important to build an economy with more opportunities for Bahamian advancement and ownership. Recovery was never a good enough goal. Recovery was never a good enough goal. Instead, recovery must be a stepping stone to a new era in the Bahamas. It's time for our country to take big steps forward in solving the challenges that have held us back for too long. You've heard us say it before. We didn't come here to defend the status quo. We came here to change it, because changing the status quo is the best way to change lives. Changing the status quo means challenging the systems, practices, and powers that be if they aren't serving the people well, and innovating and building something better. We are challenging the status quo in our energy sector. We just passed 2 new comprehensive pieces of legislation that provide the framework for the first serious energy reforms in the Bahamas in decades.
Yeah.
We did not need additional evidence that our outdated electricity infrastructure is falling apart, but unfortunately, there's been plenty evidence of that recently. Let's check what happened last night in the East, decaying transfer ship.
Yep.
Just fell apart.
Yep.
Nothing could be clearer. Temporary patches and band-aids aren't sufficient. Despite the enormous scale of the challenge, with BPL, more than $500 million in debt, we are finalizing comprehensive energy reforms, which will upgrade and modernize our failing grid, bring solar on board in a big way, pull down sky-high costs, and increase reliability.
Gotta be done.
We are also challenging the status quo in healthcare, building not just one new hospital, but two, one in New Providence and one in Grand Bahama. Even as we are renovating clinics and procuring ambulance for our family islands and making long overdue investment in mental health care. We are challenging the status quo in Grand Bahama, where the Port Authority has been earning private profits at the public's expense while failing to live up to their responsibility to develop Freeport. It's time, long past time, for change in Grand Bahama. The people of Grand Bahama deserve a credible partner with a vision for progress and shared prosperity. We are challenging the Nassau-centric status quo by recognizing that the people and potential of the family islands have long been overlooked and underestimated. That's why solar energy, new investments, and infrastructure improvements are in motion across our archipelago. We are challenging the status quo in labor relations. We signed 27 labor agreements in 30 months, after none had been signed in the previous 4 years.
Zero.
Because Bahamian workers, and we appreciate this, that Bahamian workers deserve dignity and security. We are challenging the status quo when it comes to work permits, insisting that employers live up to their obligation to identify and train Bahamians for these positions. We are challenging the status quo with a new National Youth Guard, a pioneering force to support our security forces during national emergencies. Young Bahamians can gain career-ready skills while training to serve our country. I was proud to attend the graduation of the very impressive second cohort just a few weeks ago. Their strength is our country's strength. We are challenging the status quo when it comes to tax fairness by stepping up collection from the wealthiest companies because they must shoulder their fair share of the tax burden. It is astounding that some of the wealthiest and most powerful have treated paying taxes they owe as optional. That's never going to be the case under our administration. We are challenging the status quo on unregulated communities. Our task force is demolishing shanty towns because they are unsafe, they are unhealthy, they alter life on our islands, and they are against the law. And we are challenging the status quo, which has allowed gangs to flourish. We passed tough new anti-gang measures to give the police new tools to disrupt and dismantle the gangs, which have terrorized our communities. And we are tabling new legislation this month to increase penalties for illegal weapons. It's very simple. Bahamians who follow the law shouldn't be menaced and endangered by those who don't. We are challenging, Madam Speaker, the status quo in our justice system. We put in place stricter bail laws to stop the endless cycle of those out on bail violating the terms of their bail and remaining free to commit more violence. Those who are granted bail can no longer take their freedom for granted or so easily gamble with their lives and the lives of those in their communities. We built new courts, and we passed a law to allow defendants to choose judge-alone trials because the backlog and long delays in our system have for far too long encouraged criminals to act with impunity. We are challenging the status quo by finally redeveloping downtown, where we are tearing down the old and making way for the new. We are challenging the status quo with the first meaningful government support for affordable housing in many years and with rent to own, which will see consequential investment and progress this year. We are challenging the status quo in our schools. We are developing a new curriculum, and we have now served more than 100,000 breakfasts to primary school children, ensuring they get a healthy start to their day that allows them to focus on learning rather than the pangs of hunger in their stomachs. We are challenging the status quo by making strategic investments in our nation's food security, while expanding BAMSI to support Bahamians who want a future in our agriculture industry. We are challenging the status quo on the world stage. We work hard to get the Bahamas off the blacklist. We are strengthening partnerships to protect our borders, and we are building alliances with other small island nations to fight for economic climate justice. We are a small country that knows how to stand tall. These are only some of the ways we are changing, or things are changing. We are bringing innovation and technology to policing. We are digitizing across the public sector. We are opening up opportunities in regulated cannabis cultivation, while for the first time allowing sick patients to use cannabis when other medicines can't relieve symptoms. We invested in free Wi-Fi in the parks. We raised the minimum wage. We created a catastrophic health care fund. These policies and others are adding up to meaningful change. Madam Speaker, we are determined to address the issues that have been holding our country back, and we are doing just that in partnership with the Bahamian people. When it comes to our country's fiscal outlook, we have moved the country from free fall and crisis to solid ground. When we entered office in September of 2021, everyone was talking about downgrades and fiscal cliffs. There was even talk by some of a possible currency devaluation. I know many Bahamians were anxious about the major tax hikes, which were rumored to be under consideration by the previous administration, and thought to be an impetus for calling an early election.
Forget that part.
You forgot it. As the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, I have the privilege of presenting this budget and telling you about the decisions we made which move our countries from sky-high deficits to fiscal stability, and while lowering VAT instead of raising it.
So they couldn't do that either.
I want to begin by acknowledging that although I'm very proud of our excellent team in the Ministry of Finance, our country's fiscal achievements have been a joint production. The results of hard work, not just in my ministry and in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, but also in departments throughout our government. As Prime Minister, I've emphasized that focus on fiscal prudence requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. And I'm grateful to my colleagues and their teams for responding with a shared seriousness of purpose. In the Ministry of Finance, we have seen and felt support for these shared goals in a series of meetings we have held with ministries and various agencies. ministers, permanent secretaries, and heads of public operations are in attendance and actively participate in an approach that leads to better outcomes and supports accountability. In many cases, tough choices have to be made, and making them has required flexibility and openness to innovation and a consensus about key priorities. Working together, we've been able to continue our commitment to fiscal consolidation, strengthen public finances, and a lower burden of public debt. Madam Speaker, the remainder of this budget communication I've divided into 4 sections. The first presents an analysis of the current microeconomic and fiscal conditions, as well as future prospects, which underpin the framework for this year's budget proposals. Following, there is a discussion of significant financial developments in the Bahamas. Subsequently, the key policy measures outlined in this budget are presented. And then finally, a summary of the anticipated fiscal outcomes for the fiscal year 2024-2025 are provided. I turn now to an overview of the current economic developments and the future projections for both the international and Bahamian economies. This will serve as the basis for the subsequent discourse on the development of the budget framework, as well as the strategies that have been formulated to address obstacles and capitalize on opportunities. Given the tightly interconnected global economy, it is important to begin with an assessment of global economic climate. According to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, as stated in their April 2024 World Economic Outlook, the world experienced a 3.2% real GDP growth rate last year, and that same rate is estimated for 2024. This pace of growth is considered relatively modest by historical standards and reflects factors such as ongoing high borrowing costs, the withdrawal of fiscal support, and geo-economic fragmentation. Global inflation was estimated at 6.8% in 2023 and is expected to gradually decline to 5.9% in 2024. Ongoing inflationary pressures reflect the impact of energy price shocks and other supply-side disturbances that have influenced prices on a global scale. Madam Speaker, in the United States, the Bahamas' major trading partner, the growth outlook has improved modestly from 2.5% in 2023 to 2.7% in 2024. This upward revision reflects better than expected growth results in the fourth quarter of 2023, with that momentum expected to continue through in 2024. The unemployment rate is projected to increase in the United States to 4%, and in 2024, and from 3.6% in 2023. Inflation is expected to fall to 2.9% in 2024 from 4.1% in 2023. A slowdown in the U.S. economy would have considerable impact on our country, one of the reasons why it is so important to build fiscal buffers. The economy in Canada, our country's second major source of visitors, grew by 1.7% in 2023. With the persistence of above-target inflation and ongoing high borrowing costs, the real GDP growth rate is projected to decrease to 1.3% in 2024. The rate of unemployment in Canada is expected to rise to 6.2% in 2024 from 5.5% in 2023. Real growth in China is projected to slow from 5.4% in 2023 to 4.6% in 2024, as property sector strains continue to weigh on private demand and confidence. The Eurozone is projected to experience a gradual economic recovery following a challenging period because of the war in Ukraine. According to the April 2024 World Economic Outlook, weak consumer sentiment and the lingering effects of the pandemic in the form of fiscal policy constraints contributed to subdued growth of 0.4% in 2023. Madam Speaker, according to the 2024 Latin American and Caribbean Microeconomic Report, the region experienced stronger than expected growth in 2023, the real GDP growth reaching 2.3%. However, as 2024 approached, real GDP growth prospects deteriorated slightly for the region and most sub-regions, with current forecasts putting growth at close to 2% in 2024. Madam Speaker, the Bahamian economy has recovered to its pre-pandemic level since 2022, with growth momentum continuing into 2023. The recently released GDP estimates by the Bahamas National Statistical Institute, BNSI, indicate that real GDP growth was on the order of 2.6% in 2023, while GDP in nominal terms increased by 9.2%. The IMF now projects that the Bahamian economy will post real growth at 2.3% in 2024, as large tourist inflows fuel the economy and inflation continues to decline. The most recent official data from BNSI shows 22% growth in the construction industry, reflecting robust economic conditions, government investment in infrastructural improvements, and increased private investments in building projects. The tourism sector has seen significant expansion, driven by a rise in tourist arrivals. Service industries, such as hotels, casinos, and sporting facilities, benefited from the increase in tourist activity, growing by 10%. Further, the rise in tourist inflows has resulted in an increase in tourism expenditure that has driven a 5% gain in export services. Household consumption saw an 8% rise in 2023 compared to the previous year. Household consumption levels reflect the spending behavior of households and are often considered a proxy for assessing economic well-being. This increase in purchasing power shows that positive economic developments are reaching Bahamian families. Customs data reveal an increase in household items in 2023 relative to 2022. Just to share two examples, imports of major household appliances increased by double digits, and there was a 17% increase seen for the import of gasoline. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas had 9.7 million visitors in 2023, representing a 37.9% increase from the 7 million arrivals in 2022. The influx of visitors last year underscores the substantial growth in arrivals since the peak in 2019. There was a peak in 2019, and that peak arrived at 7.3 million visitors. So we see the substantial growth going back compared to 2019. At present, during the initial 3 months of 2024, the number of arrivals reached 3 million, reflecting a 14.9% growth when compared to the first 3 months of 2023. In other words, 2024 is off to a very strong beginning, surpassing not only the levels recorded in 2023, but also exceeding those of 2019 by 50.8% for the same time. Speaker, I will also consider the performance of tourism by island as a proxy for economic activity on those islands. Look, in New Providence, tourist activity grew by 35.7% in 2023 compared to the year prior. I ain't go back to 2019, that would be great. We wouldn't talk about 2019. In Grand Bahama, arrivals increased by 31.8%. In Abaco, 25.1% growth in tourism. Andros also experienced a 9.1% increase. Bimini, arrival is 10.8%. Eleuthera, 6.3%. Exuma, 7.8%. And now listen to this. San Salvador, 348.1%. Tourism is working for me. Long Island grew by 5.8%. Now, you know, I gotta say what Cat Island doing. Cat Island grew by 8.7%. Now, I'm just saying this now. That 8.7%, you know, that's over last year. So last year we had growth.
That ain't before that.
And we have further growth. But let me say, if you go to 2019, now for Cat Island going to 2019, the growth rate this year over what we had in 2019 is 74%. So the Family Island is, like I said, we're breaking this cycle of Nassau-centric. Now, Madam Speaker, again, with respect to the short-term vacation rental industry, data provided by Airbnb confirm the favorable improvement in tourism. At the end of March 2024, total room nights sold increased by 16.7% from the previous year, reflecting the rise in average occupancy rates for both entire unit listings and comparable hotel listings. I'm pleased to report that investors have had their confidence restored in the Bahamas. And as a result, we have attracted and developed more than $7.2 billion in investments, representing more than 7,000 new jobs for Bahamians since we entered office. Projects like the Royal Caribbean's Royal Beach Club on Paradise Island, the new Celebration Key development by Carnival Cruise Lines in Grand Bahama, and the Disney Entertainment Facility in Eleuthera represent important commitments from some of the world's leading companies and will generate significant opportunities for Bahamians. We are finalizing discussions with Bahamas for an exciting new development phase at the Malaya property. The planned expansion of the Grand Bahama Shipyard is set to bring new business opportunities, diversifying our economy and bolstering our industrial sector. Madam Speaker, projects and investments like these are crucial drivers of our economic resurgence, and we intend to ensure that Bahamians have the opportunity to benefit from the entrepreneurial opportunities that follows such expansive development. Not just jobs. As foreign direct investment continues to grow, we anticipate a rise in job and entrepreneurial opportunities and growth in the construction sector. The global inflation crisis has hit countries like ours very hard. The cost of living on an island where we need to import so much of what we consume was already too high. And the global inflation crisis was yet another unwelcome shock. We needed a break after Hurricane Dorian and the COVID pandemic, but instead we got global supply chain interruptions, turbulent commodity markets, and higher food and energy costs. Inflation in the Bahamas has been on a downward path since its peak in mid-2022 and is lower compared to regional peers. The inflation rate in 2023 moderated to 3.1% from the 5.6% in 2022. According to the IMF, inflation in the Bahamas is forecast to decline to 2.4% in 2024. Last year, BNSI released its updated labor force survey. The results show that unemployment was, as I indicated earlier, its lowest level since 2008. With the employment rate at 8.8% in 2023. As well, for the first time in over a decade, labor force participation was higher, and the unemployment rate was lower for women relative to men. Madam Speaker, a review of other key indicators shows that monetary conditions in the Bahamas remain favorable and support stability in our exchange rate. During the initial 3 months of 2024, there was an increase in external reserves by $547 million, bringing the total amount to $2.9 billion. This growth was driven by net foreign currency inflows from the private sector, meaning it was not achieved through borrowing. It is projected that external reserves will continue to be strong, supported by inflows from tourism and other private sector activities. External balances are expected to exceed international standards, providing ample support for the Bahamian dollar's currency peg. Further, the estimated current account deficit narrowed at the end of 2023 as the services account surplus strengthened, supported by the ongoing gains in tourism earnings. Madam Speaker, traditionally the budget communication includes a discussion of the 9-month fiscal performance ending in March. I plan to adhere to this tradition. But before proceeding, I would like to highlight that historically, March has typically been the highest revenue-generating month in any given fiscal year. Consistent with that pattern, March 2024 was indeed a strong month. But it is the month following to which I draw your attention. The preliminary total revenue for April 24 is estimated to be $385.8 million, reflecting a significant increase of $108.6 million or 39.2% compared to April in the previous year. The strong revenue performance in April shows that fourth quarter revenue performance will be very strong, which provides the basis for our favorable outlook for meeting our revenue targets at the end of this fiscal year. I will now review the fiscal performance from July 2023 to March 2024, the first 3 quarters of the last fiscal year. Total revenue for the period, that 9 months, amounted to $2.2 billion, which marks an increase of $112.4 million or 5.4% as compared to the previous fiscal year. At this time, total revenue stood at 66% of the budget forecast, not out of line with expectations, owing to timing considerations. This improvement in revenue performance resulted from an increase in tax revenue of $136.9 million to a total of $2 billion. Tax revenue to date amounts to 67% of the budget forecast. Revenue highlights during the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year are as follows. Taxes collected on property grew by $18.4 million and totaled $145.6 million, which represents 74.6% of the budget targeted. This increase period over period was expected due to the strengthening of the collection exercises under the Real Property Tax Act, a majority of which is collected from non-Bahamians. To demonstrate our revenue enhancement efforts, I can report that real property tax accounts experienced a 3% increase in 2023 compared to 2022, and a further 2.3% increase in 2024 compared to 2023. This increase is reflected in the 2023 real property tax billings exceeding those of 2022 by 14.6%. As of the current year, 2024, the real property tax billings have surpassed those of 2023 by 5.1%. It is evident that the increase in revenue cannot solely be attributed to inflation, but rather to the diligent collection efforts of our dedicated public officials. VAT receipts improved by $58.5 million, or 6.3%, and amounted to $993.9 million, following amendments to the VAT Act strengthening collections enforcement. This total accounts for 62.5% of the budget target. Data indicates that the number of VAT registrants has risen by 9.4% in 2023 compared to 2022, and by an additional 2.9% in 2024 compared to 2023. Some taxes on financial transactions and VAT on real estate transactions grew by $2.8 million and totaled $82.5 million, or 71.9% of the budget estimates. The area of revenue underperformance, which became apparent during these 9 months, is the VAT on real estate transactions. For example, we look at the budget forecast for VAT on realty transactions over $1 million. It is $190.3 million. At the end of March 2024, we have only collected $15.1 million, or 7.9% of this total. It has also been observed that the certificate of residency and international holding permits issuance are consistent with our balance of payments data that shows strong inflow of funds for property purchases. Last year's revenue intake of this item was $121.1 million. These are the reasons why it is necessary for this government to take a deeper dive into the underperformance of this category of revenue. And we're talking about sale of property that is worth $1 million and more. We have addressed this issue of underperformance in this year's budget by implementing legal and administrative measures to improve compliance in this area. These measures will be explained later in this communication. Excise taxes on alcohol and tobacco totaled $16.7 million, a $15 million increase from the same period last year, surpassing the budget forecast by $14.3 million. Although our original forecast anticipated a decrease in this item due to this new distinction between excise taxes and excise duties, this revenue performance can be directly attributed to improved enforcement efforts. Licenses to conduct special business activity, which comprise business licenses and communication levies, increased by $43 million and total $126.3 million. To date, this represents 80.1% of the budget forecast. Taxes on international trade and transactions increased by $11.1 million and total $502.3 million and can be largely explained by the following items. Customs and other import duties increased by $4.4 million in the first 3 quarters of the 23-24 fiscal year, an increase of 2.4%. To date, this represents 76.1% of the budget target. Departure tax collections increased by $7.2 million and total $134 million, representing 67.2% of the budget target. Although non-tax revenue met an overall decrease of 9% period over period, sales of goods and services improved by 13.4%. This was a result of an increase in revenue garnered from fees and service charges. Non-tax revenue equated 59.2% of the budget projection. Given revenue performance to date, we expect all major revenue components, with the exception of VAT, on real estate transactions to meet revenue targets. I want to express my gratitude to the public, including the private sector, for their cooperation in meeting tax obligations and acknowledge the significant efforts made by our country's revenue collection agency to collect that which is owed under the law. I turn to expenditure performance during the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year. Total expenditure increased by $76.9 million to $2.4 billion during the first 9 months of the fiscal year. This fulfills 69.7% of the budget target. Specifically, recurrent expenditure increased by $35.9 million to a total of $2.2 billion, which accounts for 70.3% of the budget forecast. This increase reflects the following. Outlay on compensation of employees increased by $35 million to a total of $629 million, representing 73.5% of the budget target. This reflects a higher public sector wage bill due to various union agreements and employee promotions and reclassification reforms, or classification reforms. Interest payments on public debt increased by $17.3 million to a total of $409.1 million and amounted to 66.8% of the budget forecast. Payments on foreign currency obligations total $205.7 million, or 50.3% of the total, while payments on our domestic debt obligations total $203.4 million, or 49.7% of the total. Beyond those increases in expenditure, a few categories of spending experienced reductions. Spending on the use of goods and services had a modest decline of 0.1% to a total of $431.7 million, which represents 68.7% of the budget forecast. Current transfers, not elsewhere classified, fell by $4.8 billion to $158.5 billion, or 62.5% of the budget forecast. Government subsidies contracted by $17.6 million and totaled $312.8 million. This equals 76.7% of the budget forecast. Regarding capital expenditure, spending increased by $41 million, totaling $235 million, which accounts for 64.4% of the budget forecast. This increase was driven by a net rise for the acquisition of non-financial assets, including building maintenance for education facilities, roadworks, sporting infrastructure development, and family island capital development. The government's fiscal performance for the first 9 months of the fiscal year shows a deficit of $214.1 million, which accounts for 2% of nominal GDP. This represents a decrease of 14.3% from the deficit of $249.8 billion in the same period of the prior year. The deficit in the previous year amounted to 2.4% of nominal GDP at the end of March 2023. We achieved a decrease in the deficit via operational efficiency while ensuring no new taxes and controlling expenditure. I want to note that payables have been declining, falling to 2.1% of nominal GDP at the end of 2023, so that any suggestions that the reduction in the deficit is due to an accumulation of payable will be erroneous or are erroneous. Now, the primary balance performance. The primary balance, Madam Speaker, refers to the difference between a government's total revenue and its non-interest expenditure. This measure provides significant insight from a fiscal policy perspective into a country's fiscal health. This represents the ability to meet financial obligations without relying on borrowing. At the end of March 2024, the primary balance reflected a surplus equating to $194.9 million, or 1.8% of nominal GDP. This represents an improvement over the primary surplus of $142 million, or 1.4% of GDP in the prior fiscal year. To date, this equates to 40.5% of the budget forecast. This increasing primary surplus signifies that revenue collection is growing faster than primary government spending. In fact, for the third consecutive time, we have achieved a primary surplus. The primary surplus shows that the government is not borrowing for public interest expenses. Going forward, most borrowings will be for critical infrastructure as we continue on the path to achieve a balanced budget. Maintaining a healthy primary balance is crucial for ensuring long-term fiscal stability and avoiding excessive debt accumulation. Madam Speaker, as a result of net borrowing activities, total central government debt totaled $11.5 billion at the end of March 2024. Domestic currency debt accounted for $6.1 billion, or 52.6% of total central government debt. Foreign currency debt accounted for $5.5 billion, or 47.4% of total central government debt. Over the period, the debt to GDP ratio has been trending downwards as the government stands firm on its debt strategy and achieving its medium-term debt target. As such, at the end of March 2024, the debt stock equated to 79.9% of GDP, a decrease from the ratio of 80.3% at the end of June 2023. That is the end of the last full fiscal year. In their most recent staff report, the IMF predicted that the debt to GDP ratio would decline to 78% by financial year 2027 and 2028. As you can see, our debt to GDP ratio has already reached 79.9% of GDP by the end of March. We are several years ahead of schedule.
That's a screwdriver?
We are several years
That's a
ahead
screwdriver?
of schedule. It's no small thing to beat IMF projections by several years, and doing so reflects the seriousness of our commitment to our fiscal plan and our debt reduction strategy. Madam Speaker, as I previously indicated, revenue receipts showed robust performance during the 9-month period to March 2024 and extraordinary performance during the month of April 2024. Year over year, revenue growth is currently at 9%, notwithstanding the underperformance in VAT on real estate transactions. We expect little or no fall in revenue performance over the last month of the fiscal year and project total revenue of $3.1 billion, which represents an 8% increase in overall revenue. On the expenditure side, we project both recurrent and capital expenditure to be slightly below our original estimates, with recurrent expenditure expected to be about 5% below budget and capital expenditure around 10% below budget. Most of the shortfall in the capital spending directly relates to slow disbursements from multilateral funded projects. Total expenditure is expected to be $3.3 billion in comparison to the budgeted amount of $3.4 billion. We estimate that our projected deficit is going to fall between 1% and 1.5% of GDP, slightly higher than the 23-24 original forecast of 0.9% of GDP. However, our projection accounts for a 60.6% decrease in the deficit outturn from the previous fiscal year of 2022-2023. Projected deficit between 1 and 1.5% of GDP is also lower than the IMF projection of 2.6% of GDP in their staff report released in January of 2024. This outturn can be directly attributed to robust revenue performance in most categories and our consistent commitment to expenditure control. I now shift our focus to the subject of government financing. With respect to domestic debt, we have undertaken strategic measures to bolster our financial position. We have successfully issued $236.4 million in Treasury bills and $149.2 million in local bonds, demonstrating confidence in our domestic markets. Additionally, our commitment to fiscal responsibility is evident in our net prepayment of $131.1 million in central bank advances and $117.1 million on existing loans. These actions reflect our dedication to managing our domestic debt obligations responsibly and sustainably. Turning to external debt, we have secured crucial financing arrangements to support our nation's development agenda. Notably, we have received a commercial loan of $500 million from Banco Santana and BNP Paribas, bolstered by an IDB policy-based guarantee. I explained that the Banco Santana transaction in great deal during the mid-year budget earlier this year, so it is on public record. Continuing disbursements totaling approximately $63.1 million on new and existing multilateral debt have further fortified our external financial position. We have also remained steadfast in our commitment to fiscal discipline by repaying $662.4 million on existing external debt. Madam Speaker, at the end of March 2024, the weighted average interest rate on our existing debt was 5.8%. This reflects an increase from our total weighted average interest rate of 5.6% in 2023. This uptick indicates a modest rise in borrowing costs over the period. Further analysis reveals that the interest rates for external bonds experienced a slight uptick, reaching 7.3% at the end of March 2024, compared to 7.2% in the end of March 2023. The interest rates for external loans increased to 6.8% at the end of March 2024, compared to the 5.9% at the end of March 2023. However, our domestic debt portfolio remained relatively stable, with interest rates for both bonds and loans holding firm at 4.6% and 4.9% respectively. In terms of debt maturity at the end of March 2023, the average time for maturity stood at 6.6 years, reflecting stability in the government's debt profile. However, by March 2024, there was a slight decrease in the average time to maturity to 6.5 years, primarily driven by changes in the internal loan component. Notably, the average time to maturity for external debt remained steady at 6.6 years, underscoring the government's efforts to manage external financing risk amidst challenging market conditions. I am pleased to share with you the latest developments regarding our medium-term debt management strategy, which underscores significant progress in areas which are critical to our nation's financial stability. Firstly, our government has made substantial strides in shifting away from costly external commercial debt. Recognizing the importance of fiscal sustainability, we have actively shifted our borrowing focus from external markets towards the more favorable options available domestically. This strategic shift not only helps to reduce borrowing costs, but also strengthens our resilience by tapping into the stability of the domestic market. Another notable achievement is the prolonging of the average maturity time of our debt. By extending the maturity profile of our debt, we are actively mitigating refinancing risk and enhancing overall debt sustainability. This allows us to better align with our long-term fiscal objectives, alleviating the burden of short-term debt obligations and providing more stable financing conditions over time. The advancement in our medium-term debt management strategy reflect our commitment to prudent fiscal management and the pursuit of sustainable economic policies. Madam Speaker, to understand our fiscal situation, one must understand the impact of the climate crisis on the Bahamas. Yes. Small island nations like ours have contributed only a tiny fraction of the fossil fuel emissions which are causing climate change. But we are among the most vulnerable to the impact of warming seas, more intense storms, and environmental degradation. In fact, the Inter-American Development Bank estimated that our country sustained $7.7 billion in economic loss in the past decade alone from the impact of extreme storms like Dorian and Matthew. These storms leave in their wake terrible tragedies, and they also leave behind the kind of destruction which slows our national development. Storms have wiped out hospitals, airports, roads, schools, water and sewage pipes, disrupting economic activity, reducing government revenue, and requiring new government spending. We borrowed in order to recover and rebuild, increasing our debt burden, which affects the interest rates we pay, which are already higher than we want them to be, because lenders price in our future climate risks too. As you have heard me say many times, we are paying for the hurricanes of the past and the hurricanes of the future. That's why we have worked so hard to stand up for the Bahamas on the world stage, forming alliances with other small island nations and working for climate justice at summits with leaders from around the world. Fairness principles, such as the polluter pays, means that wealthy, high-emissions countries should pay for the impact caused by their pollution. Yes. The establishment of a loss and damage fund at the United Nations is a good start, but it will be a fight to induce countries to fund it properly. That's one of the reasons why we've been working to be the first country in the world to establish blue carbon credits. Our seagrass meadows cover 92,000 square kilometers, and absorb as much or even more carbon than the Amazon rainforest. We worked with the IMF so that blue carbon credits could be established as an asset class. And we are working with scientists and an independent verification company to methodically map and quantify the seagrasses. When we have finished the mapping and the verification process, we will be in a strong position to determine the best way to move forward. The voluntary carbon credits market has changed a lot since we entered office, and new efforts to regulate and standardize practices are underway. Our goals remain the same: to protect our beautiful waters and to be compensated properly for the role our seagrasses play in removing carbon from the atmosphere. In addition, separately, we are also considering a debt for nature arrangement, which could allow the government to increase our conservation efforts, such as improving our biodiversity and the health of our ecosystems, while reducing the government's cost of capital. And as part of our strategy to manage debt, the Bahamas has joined the Development Bank for Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF, which will increase our access to concessional resources. In April of this year, 2 agreements with the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean were signed to start the process of the Bahamas obtaining full membership in CAF. The legislation to join CAF will be tabled during the budget debate. CAF is a development bank committed to improving the quality of life in Latin America and the Caribbean, with over $54 billion in assets and a robust credit rating. CAF promotes sustainable development and regional integration with an aim of converting the organization into a green and blue bank. Membership in CAF provides the Bahamas new opportunities to improve the quality of life for all Bahamians and underscores our country's commitment to development, environmental protection, and preparing for the growing impacts of climate change. Speaker, I'm pleased to share with you an update on the Bahamas' credit rating as assessed by Moody's Investor Services and S&P Global Ratings. In April 2024, Moody's Investor Services affirmed the Bahamas credit rating at B1 with a stable outlook. Despite the challenges we face, Moody's acknowledges several strengths in our nation. These include our stable political system, a robust institutional framework, and recent improvements in fiscal policy effectiveness. These factors have contributed to the maintenance of our stable credit outlook. Similarly, in September 2023, S&P Global Ratings reaffirmed the Bahamas credit rating at B+ with a stable outlook. This decision reflects the resilience of our economy, led by the tourism sector, which has facilitated fiscal improvements and slowed the growth of total debt accumulation. The strategies implemented by our government to address financing and refinancing needs, combined with the stability of our political environment, have instilled confidence in our ability to manage risk and uphold microeconomic stability. Madam Speaker, on February 20th, 2024, the Ministry of Finance announced that the Bahamas has been removed from the European Union's list of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax purposes. That is, the removal of the blacklist. This accomplishment is a result of the hard work and dedication of our government. Over the past years, we have made significant progress in addressing concerns from the OECD and the EU through measures such as investing in new reporting systems and increasing compliance efforts. Our goal now is to secure a fully equipped monitoring mechanism designation and to remain off the EU's blacklist. In October 2022, we embarked on a transformative journey with the launch of the Go Bonfire e-procurement platform, aimed at modernizing our procurement procedures and enhancing transparency across all government agencies. This platform empowers vendors by providing them with seamless access to procurement opportunities, which allow them to efficiently search for opportunities, download necessary documents, and receive timely notices. As of May 9th, 2024, the data from Go Bonfire portal speaks volumes about the tangible benefits of this initiative. With total government savings amounting to $16.5 million, we have successfully optimized spending and negotiation processes, leading to substantial cost reductions. Moreover, the registration of 6,377 external vendors signifies robust participation and healthy competition in government procurement, fostering a vibrant marketplace. Furthermore, the platform's provision of 4,177 total opportunities encompassing completed, evaluated, open, and archived projects underscores its pivotal role in promoting transparency and accessibility throughout the procurement process. Madam Speaker, the 2024 Fiscal Strategy Report will be tabled immediately after this budget. This report follows the guidelines set by the Public Finance Management Act, demonstrating the government's commitment to budget credibility, transparency, and fiscal sustainability. It outlines the government's medium-term fiscal framework, which serves as the foundation for shaping the financial year 2024-2025, the budget, annual borrowing plan, and medium-term debt strategy. On the capital expenditure fiscal targets, Madam Speaker, I would like to provide further clarity on the medium-term capital expenditure fiscal target. According to the Public Finance Management Act and the Fiscal Strategy Report, capital expenditure is projected to be 3.5% of GDP by the fiscal year 2025-2026, and will continue to be maintained at that level. It is important to note that this ratio includes capital expenditures not only for central government, but also for the 3.5% ratio accounts for total public government capital outlays. For example, investment in airports are largely funded by the Airport Authority. Thus, this clarification is now made as an amendment to the PFM Act. The government acknowledges the importance of infrastructure development in promoting sustainable long-term growth. Therefore, in the medium term, capital projects will be primarily funded by state-owned entities, concessional loans, or through increased public-private partnerships, rather than relying solely on government revenues or borrowings, as relying too heavy on government revenue or borrowings for capital infrastructure could jeopardize our long-term fiscal health. Moving forward, the government plans to utilize funding from three sources: directly from state-owned enterprises' own resources, expanding public-private partnerships, and government-guaranteed loans. These sources of funding will be listed in the budget, but the actual capital investment will not be reflected in the budget estimates. In the past, funding for capital projects came almost exclusively from the government's consolidated fund. In light of this, it was important to specify that the CapEx target ratio in the medium-term fiscal framework would mainly consist of investments made by central government in the foreseeable future, which would lead to the downward trend in the long-term CapEx ratio over time. I now turn to the budget estimates. The budget estimates for total revenue in this fiscal year amounts to $3.54 billion. This estimate revenue excludes reimbursement. This estimate this estimated revenue excludes reimbursement of $75 million from the Grand Bahama Port Authority during this specific budget year. In our budget book annex, a list of tax arrears is provided, which show the total amount due to the government, inclusive of our claim of $357 million against the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Total expenditure is estimated to amount to $3.6 billion, of which recurrent expenditure accounts for $3.27 billion and capital expenditure for $344.5 million. The fiscal deficit is estimated at $69.8 billion, or 0.5% of GDP, with the primary balance showing a surplus of $586.9 million, or 3.9% of GDP. Given this, the debt to GDP ratio has been projected at 75.3% of GDP at the end of the fiscal year. On May 9th, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Public Service officially launched Cloud Bahamas, which is the name of our new government enterprise resource planning application. This application, or ERP, is going to modernize how we do business in the public service. As we have referenced in the past, the previous government put in place a compendium of financial legislation, which included reporting obligations, which could not be met using the government's existing financial information systems. We declined to speculate as to whether an error of this magnitude was intentional, but subsequent complaints about missed reporting deadlines when the government's existing systems made reporting impossible cannot be taken seriously. Thus, we have ignored the noise and focused on the remedy. So beginning in January 2025, Cloud Bahamas will bring change and innovation to the public sector. The new system will allow for improved financial reporting, including a public sector income statement and balance sheet. I'll speak to additional innovations of Cloud Bahamas later in this communication. But I'm highlighting here the improved financial reporting capacity and the significant benefit of lowering the cost of operating the public sector. In accordance with the PFM Act and to ensure prudent fiscal management, this budget year, we are appointing both the Public Sector Audit Committee and the Fiscal Responsibility Council. The Fiscal Responsibility Council will assess compliance with the general principles, fiscal responsibility principles, and fiscal objectives, and advise on fiscal and budgetary matters of the government. The Public Sector Audit Committee will advise on the resources of the Internal Audit Department and Auditor General, recommend an internal audit charter for approval by the Auditor General, advise the Financial Secretary on resources for the Internal Audit Department, review and make recommendations on audit reports and management action plans, require explanations for deficiencies in reports, review progress against the audit plan, and refer matters to the appropriate authorities. These very important new initiatives will bring substantial support to our determination to exercise prudent fiscal management. Madam Speaker, the PFM Act outlines the reporting and financial responsibilities of the state-owned enterprises. Further, in Section 113, a statement of corporate intent and business plan is also required. This administration is committed to ensuring compliance with these regulations. In cases where SOEs are unable to fulfill these obligations, they will be provided with support and guidance to help them improve their performance in these areas. Earlier this year, a workshop was provided for directors of SOEs to provide support for improving management practices, gaining efficiencies, and optimizing productivity. Our objective is to support improvements and efficiencies in our state-owned enterprises, which will support meeting fiscal and expenditure targets in the coming years. This ongoing reform process is crucial for us to stay on course towards our medium-term financial objectives. This administration's revenue philosophy has always been to lower the overall tax burden for ordinary Bahamians and to focus on tax efficiency and enforcement. This budget has no new taxes, with some adjustments made to fees on government services where the cost of providing that service has increased. Since we started prioritizing this focus, we have gained favorable results. The revenue to GDP ratio has shown consistent growth, rising from 18.7% at the beginning of our term to 20.4% in the most recent complete fiscal year, which was 2022-2023. Going forward, we will continue on this path of revenue enhancement toward the attainment of our medium-term revenue target of at least 25% of GDP. Madam Speaker, revenue measures in budget 2024 can be categorized as falling within four main priorities, which are enhancing the well-being of Bahamians and creating opportunities, increasing revenue from foreign direct investments, addressing the revenue underperformance of VAT on real estate transactions, and developing an equitable and competitive business environment. A key policy priority of our government is supporting new opportunities for Bahamians and incentivizing Bahamian participation in our growing economy. Accordingly, we are expanding the list of duty concessions, for example, in the fishing industry, including push poles, poling towers, trolling motors, refrigerated trucks. That's for bone fishers, fiberglass tanks, troughs, raceways and aquariums, aquaculture heaters and chillers, sumps, fractionators and protein skimmers, water chemistry probes and meters, water quality supplies, power heads, aquarium, agriculture lighting, ultraviolet lamps, all these to help entrepreneurs. Madam Speaker, we believe Bahamians should be given every opportunity to participate in a more modern fishing industry in the Bahamas. In addition, we want to create greater opportunities in manufacturing and reduce barriers to entry. By encouraging more opportunities in industry and manufacturing in the Bahamas, we not only broaden our economy, but we lessen our dependency on imports. Therefore, we are removing the bond requirement for authorized manufacturers under the Industry Development Act. And we are removing, under the Act, they could bring in their equipment duty-free. But if something goes wrong with that equipment and they need a part,
You bring that in duty-free now, too.
they had to pay duty on those parts. So we are removing duty, 45%. So we're removing duty on parts and machinery that's been used in those businesses. Madam Speaker, you see, removing the bond in particular, which we find to be a hard, quite an obstacle. If they put up a bond, banks are requiring for the issuance of this bond cash, which could be put back in the business to grow it. So they have to put up a bond and find $35,000 cash. If they don't have to pay cash, they also have to pay fees to the bank for holding on top of that. So that's no longer exists. Right? You don't have to do that anymore.
That's a big deal.
Right? And so that cash that has been put up for the bond could be used for their operation expenses and also to grow their business. And that's what we're about, finding the obstacles that's in the way for growth and knocking them down. We are always working to expand Bahamian ownership in the tourism industry.
Yes.
So,
Let it rain.
so in this budget, we are adding a new provision specifying that only Bahamians may be issued a license for the commercial operation of all motorized watercraft, including jet skis. The recreational watercraft industry in the Bahamas must be owned and operated by Bahamians. Yes. And as I said, this includes ownership and operation of jet skis for hire and other commercial leisure boating activity. Bahamians should get the maximum benefit from our successful tourism industry. Yes. You know, Madam Speaker, we've also included a number of additional custom duty reductions in this budget. The Tariff Act and custom regulations will be amended in the following ways. Fire extinguishers will now be duty-free. Drones will now be duty-free. Now, laundry detergents in the form of paper sheets will now be duty-free. CMOS for health benefits will now be duty-free. Digital camera parts will now be duty-free. Duty on cotton sheets, bed linen, and cotton bed linen will be reduced. Duty on composite rebar of plastic will be reduced. Duty on compostable bags will be reduced. And duty on paper bags will be reduced to encourage the use of eco-friendly packaging items. Yes. The environmental levy on kayaks, will be reduced. Yeah. Canoes. Canoes? That's they call it canoe. Right. Now, the first schedule of the Customs Management Act will be amended to add that these ATM skimmer machines, they'll now be prohibited. They'll be on our prohibited list of imported items. What we have found that these ATM skimmers was only used for one purpose, right? And we don't need them in the Bahamas. And we have found that in the Bahamas, what we discovered was most of them are being brought in by visitors, particularly from the Eastern European bloc. And when we find them, then we send them back with it. But now we'll be able to confiscate them and just have them destroyed. But they are now on our prohibited list of import items. We found there's no useful purpose for them other than for illegal purposes. So let me share some good news. Bahamians are all over the world. And very often they seek their passport. And to get their passport, they may have to travel miles to get it. So we're making provisions for a consular fee schedule so the passport office will now be able to courier Bahamian passports with their visas to your door, yes, wherever you are. A number of Bahamians live in Western Canada. And for them, sometimes to get their passport renewed, they have to come into Toronto or to Ottawa, right? Why they have to do that when they could apply online, get it? All they have to do is pay for the services. So we've introduced that new So it means that passports can now be delivered directly to the recipient's address overseas rather than requiring travel to an embassy. Yeah, if you're in Grand Bahama, you could apply, you should apply domestically. But we are issuing passports from the various islands now. So, Madam Speaker, that's what we are doing, again, for the Bahamian diaspora in particular and those who are local. In order to support our talented Bahamian artists, this budget will continue provisions which will allow Bahamian artists to import supplies and equipment on a duty-free basis. The Ministry of Finance will also create a web interface to make the process easier for the Bahamian artists. And in the coming weeks, we will bring forward new intellectual property legislation that will benefit Bahamian creatives enormously, incentivizing them to create here, where they will have new intellectual property protections and empowering them to negotiate from a stronger position with content platforms abroad. Foreign investment, foreign direct investment, has long been one of the primary drivers of our economy. And it's a driver, it's a key driver in most economies, even the United States. Another key focus of this budget is to enhance the income generated from foreign direct investments and to streamline the processes for better collection efficiency. Therefore, Madam Speaker, the Department of Immigration's expedited fee will now be 10% of the actual cost of the work permit, with no change in the minimum fee of $400. The Immigration Department will also implement a visitor's stay extension application fee of $200. This will cover the cost of issuing a visitor's card. In addition, the Trusted Traveler Program will begin this new fiscal year. The Trusted Traveler Program is designed for frequent visitors to the Bahamas and will speed up immigration processing at the border. A fee of $200 will be set for this program. We are also imposing a $500 reinstatement fee for permanent residence applications, which have been successfully concluded but not finalized after 90 days. The requirements for application for economic permanent residency have been updated. The minimum investment requirements to qualify for economic permanent residency status will be increased and diversified.
Yes.
Before the requirement only called for an investment of $750,000 in real estate. This will now be increased to $1 million in real estate investments, and we're adding, or you can purchase a zero coupon bond from the Central Bank of the Bahamas. In both cases, the assets must be held for a minimum of 10 years. This measure will come into effect January 1st, 2025. Now, the legislation in respect to this aspect makes it clear that the proceeds from the investments in the bonds can only be used for investment in education,
Yes.
health,
Yes.
culture, got on that,
Yes.
culture board,
Yes.
and family and infrastructure,
Yes.
and not to fund ordinarily expenses of the government. We are also amending the Immigration Act to clarify that a deed of gift cannot be used by foreigners to make application to qualify for permanent residency. Additionally, we propose to enforce the following rules when submitting applications for economic permanent residency based on the purchase of real estate. That is, you need to provide 3 items. Firstly, you need to provide the real property tax assessment number of the property that's being purchased. This will allow real property tax numbers to be carried through the process for greater transparency and tax efficiency. Secondly, an appraisal report that is no more than 12 months old, and to determine the value of the property. This is to ensure, as I said, that the real estate meets the minimum threshold for consideration for economic permanent residency. Finally, applicants will need to provide a stamped conveyance to the department. You know, it is not right. It's another matter, Madam Speaker. It is not right to sign away acres or seabed to commercial ventures for minimal amounts. Something I'm sorry to say has occurred too often in the past. Well, no more.
No more.
The government is currently undergoing a comprehensive evaluation of all seabed leases in order to guarantee that we are receiving a fair compensation for the use of our resources. So that is ongoing. We have also discovered that information this issue of underperformance of VAT on real estate transactions, right? We have discovered that information provided by the real estate sector about the buoyancy of the high-end real estate market, they are out there saying how buoyant the market is. But that's not being reflected in government receipts. We have witnessed a sizable drop in revenue this year from this category of activity. This is a primary underperforming revenue item that we have identified. And we have included a number of administrative measures to address the underreporting of real estate transactions. One such measure is the requirement that real property tax assessment number be provided by the Department of Inland Revenue, and has to be affixed to the certificate of registration and all certificates before forwarding on, for example, to the Department of Immigration if you're seeking permanent residence. Further, the Department of Immigration must ensure that real property tax assessment number is captured on its approved documents for economic permanent residency and homeowners. This administrative step will help streamline the process and ensure that real property tax number is carried throughout all the processes across all government agencies, which would allow for auditing to ensure that the correct tax amount is being paid. Another area of concern is the government is aware that there are a number of unstamped documents held by law firms, lawyers, and persons, which results in these persons not being able to prove land ownership to the Department of Inland Revenue and otherwise. This is an impediment for development and commerce in this country. So the government has made the decision to grant amnesty to allow documents to be stamped at the value of the time in which the transaction took place, rather than at the current market value when it's being presented. This regime is temporary and effective immediately, with an expiration date of December 1st, 2024. Now, this is a significant concession. At present, all documents are stamped at their current market value, regardless of when they were purchased. So, for example, suppose an individual purchased a property 30 years ago for $25,000 and sold that same property for $50,000, but never stamped the documents. Later on, a new prospective buyer wants to acquire the property through a mortgage. The property now has a small house on it, and it's now worth $150,000. In order to have the property financed, all of the transactions for the past 30 years need to be recorded. That is, to have the VAT paid at the current market value of $150,000, plus the penalty. So, unfortunately, this is all too often a deal breaker, preventing the transaction from moving forward, hurting both the buyer and the seller, and acting as a drag on the real estate market. So we are allowing now for persons who are holding their unstamped documents between now and December to go and have, there's a penalty to pay, but you'll pay the stamp duty on the value at the time of your purchase instead of today's market value. And you have 6 months to take advantage of that. Another measure to address the issue of revenue underperformance for VAT would be the elimination of inter-vivos transfers for non-natural persons. All inter-vivos transfers after 1st of July have to be to natural persons. Another goal of our government is to reduce barriers and encourage wider participation in all aspects of our economy. One barrier we are taking down is related to investment in the real estate sector. We are providing a VAT exemption for individuals investing in a real estate trust, where the individual investment totals less than 10% of the ownership. Thus, the real estate trust is responsible for paying VAT when initially acquiring the property. But individuals buying or selling shares in the trust are eligible for VAT exemption. This is a real estate fund. Right? This is a fund that they created. It's called a trust, but it's a trust or fund. It is required that a minimum of 10 individual investors participate in the purchase of the property, and these investors must be separate entities, not related entities, with beneficial ownership. Madam Speaker, for individual customs entries, which total more than $750,000, the maximum customs processing fee will increase from $750 to $1,000. Now that's if the entry has totals more than $750,000, you'll pay $1,000. If it's less than that, it will be the same. To reiterate, this will only impact, I reiterate again, only impact individual customs entries over $750,000 in value. Credit unions are currently taxed as other financial services entities by paying a business license fee. This budget includes an amendment to the VAT Act seeking to exempt credit unions from paying the business license fee if they pay their central bank regulatory fees. We expect that the regulatory fee applied would represent the true cost of regulation of these very important financial institutions, as the government recognizes that credit unions provide invaluable access to financing for ordinary Bahamians, and we are committed to maintaining and enhancing that access. As previously stated, Madam Speaker, in prior communications, the proposed legislation for the implementation of an international business income tax for large multinational corporations will come into effect this year. Our objective is to present the draft legislation at the conclusion of the budget debate in order to initiate the process of public consultation. This legislation will have an expected effective date of January 1st, 2024. The government estimates that introducing a qualified domestic top-up tax for in-scope Pillar 2 multinational entities operating within the Bahamas will bring in an additional $140 million in potential revenue. However, revenues from this measure will not be seen until the financial year 2025-2026. The coming into force of the international business income tax for large multinationals would necessitate changes to the current business license and stamp tax regime. For example, no business would be subject to both taxes, and the stamp tax regime would be amended to convert the 5% tax on dividends into a withholding tax to avoid a potential double taxation. We also have to ensure that there are no opportunities for tax arbitrage. And as a result, we table a new legislation. And as a result, when we table a new legislation, we'll also table amendments to the Business License Act, focusing on the largest companies with revenues of $5 million or more per annum. This is approximately 1% of the business license registrants. In the current fiscal year, 91% of registrants pay no business license fees, with declared revenue of less than $100,000 per annum. An additional 4% have declared revenues of less than $500,000, and an additional 4% have declared revenues of less than $5 million. The proposed reform will impact only the largest companies. We plan to consult closely with the business community on these measures prior to presenting new legislation to Parliament. The Business License Act is also amended to clarify that the rate for businesses with a turnover of $100,000 and below that are exempted from business license tax does not apply to financial services entities, international business companies, proprietary trading entities, and family offices. So the exemption does not apply to those categories of entities. I turn to the expenditure measures in the budget. You will see, Madam Speaker, that even as we are seeing levels of revenue, our expenditures remain measured and strategic. Our vulnerability on the front lines of climate change, our exposure to downturns in the U.S. economy, and the turbulent commodity markets which accompany geopolitical conflict all necessitate prudent fiscal management. Nonetheless, we are unwilling to postpone any longer some of the big transformative changes that our country needs in energy, in healthcare, in infrastructure, to really serve our people well, to support a vibrant economy, and to give us strength and resilience in uncertain times. The government cannot shoulder the full costs of transformative change across multiple sectors simultaneously, especially after years of one external shock after another, from Dorian to COVID to the global inflation crisis. We need to limit upfront costs for the government so that we can create the fiscal buffer we need to survive external shocks. But we do not accept constraints on the size of our ambition. Thus, we are creating public-private partnerships in critical areas. Other new projects and initiatives will be funded via government-guaranteed loans. And we are moving to limit state subsidies for our state-owned enterprises, which we believe can become profitable revenue generators rather than expenses. We don't need to scale back our ambitions. We just need creativity and innovation to achieve them. As I review some key expenditure measures, it will be clear that the investment in this budget are investments in our people, our safety, our prosperity, and our future. A strong public sector, Madam Speaker, is essential for a nation's progress. Beginning in July of last year, the Ministry of Labor and Public Service rolled out the first public service-wide promotional exercise in over 9 years, providing an additional $18 million for public servants. This is separate and apart from our efforts to eliminate the decades-long promotions backlog, which is moving steadily along. As of today, we have negotiated over 27 trade union agreements, as I mentioned earlier, increasing salaries and introducing new benefits for many public servants, including our uniformed branches, teachers, and nurses. Between the promotions and the new trade union agreements, thousands of public servants have been positively impacted. Even so, we believe salaries are too low, and that fair compensation is crucial for attracting and retaining the best employees. Therefore, funds have been designated in this budget to conduct and implement a salary review with the aim of increasing the compensation for the entire public service, including accountants, nurses, teachers, defense force officers, police officers, immigration officers, corrections and custom officers, all of whom should be adequately compensated for their hard work and dedication. In addition, funding has been allocated for the continuation of training of mid-level and senior public officers through the University of the Bahamas, and for the full implementation of the Public Service Scholars Program. Funding has been allocated for a project aimed at enhancing the skill set of individuals within the public service workforce. Madam Speaker, during the current year, we invested in digital transformation of the public service to streamline efficiency and productivity. Nearly 1 million files have been scanned and digitized, and soon all human resources and payroll processes will be automated and digitized with the rollout of the Cloud Bahamas system. Key features include a redesigned and fully electronic salary notifications form, online job applications for most posts, and biweekly salary payments for all employees. At the macro level, Cloud Bahamas will lower the cost of operating the public sector, moving the public sector from a reactive mode to a proactive mode. In simple terms, it means that individuals will not have to wait 20 years to be paid the right salary, or the government does not have to wait 5 years to be notified that an employee has abandoned his or her job. Other innovations are on the way. During the upcoming budget cycle, we will launch a pilot to provide free training and paid apprenticeships through the National Apprenticeships Program. We will also fully launch the Notice of Vacancy Policy Enforcement Unit to ensure that Bahamian understudies are trained for roles currently occupied by non-Bahamians.
Yes.
Funds have been allocated to implement the government's reform pension plan. This reform is very important to managing the government's existing pension liability. On February 21st, 2024, the government commenced a public feedback process on the draft pensions bills, which aim to reshape the public service retirement system to enhance preservation, reduce pension liabilities, and ensure equitable employee benefits. The bill proposes the establishment of a contributory public service pensions fund, transitioning from a non-funded, non-contributory scheme to a funded and defined contributory pension plan. This administration anticipates tabling this bill at a time before the summer recess during this session of Parliament. However, this reform pension plan only addresses the pension needs going forward. We are still looking into addressing government's legacy pension plan, as the introduction of a contributory pension plan does not address the existing pension liability of the government. Madam Speaker, we don't believe in resting on our successes. We believe in expanding on them. We broke records with nearly 10 million visitors last year. Now we want to break new records and support a record number of success stories for Bahamian entrepreneurs. That's why we have launched a tourism development fund to provide targeted funding for local tourism-based businesses. And we have opened a free incubation center, a shared working space for innovative small businesses at the heart of downtown Bay Street.
Yes.
Speaking of Bay Street, that's another place where the status quo has long been unacceptable. This year, we made significant progress on demolishing derelict and abandoned buildings that stood as eyesores for years. Our investment in tourism included expanded airlift to the US, Canada, and Europe, and the beginning of works on the Bimini, Cat Island, Georgetown airports. We started demolition works for the Grand Bahama International Airport, and we will begin construction of the new Grand Bahama Airport this budget cycle. Investing in airports is a strategic move that can yield significant returns. Airports are key drivers for economic growth and development. Funding for the airports in Cat Island, Exuma, and Grand Bahama are expected to be sourced from the Saudi Fund for Development and other government-guaranteed loans provided to the airport authority. In this budget, we recognize that strategic investments in sports tourism, promotion helps us draw visitors, stimulate revenue, and create jobs. Moreover, sports tourism elevates our global standing, solidifying the Bahamas as a venue for sporting events and competitions on the international stage. Further funding has also been allocated to bid for the 2026 World Relays and prepare for the upcoming 2026 Bahama Games. As part of our ongoing efforts to enhance our tourism product and attract more visitors, funding has also been allocated for the upgrade of national sites managed by the Clifton Heritage Authority and the Antiquities Monuments and Museum Corporation. These investments will help to improve infrastructure facilities and overall visitor experience at key attractions. By upgrading these sites, we can best showcase our rich cultural heritage and natural beauty. We are doing more to ensure that the experience of traveling to and from the Bahamas is a positive one. We introduced additional immigration booths at the Lyndon Pilling International Airport to alleviate congestion and reduce wait times. Given the record levels of arrivals we are seeing, in the upcoming budget cycle, we will recruit an additional 100 immigration officers. These investments will allow us to take full advantage of the enormous growth we are seeing in tourism. National security is essential for national growth and development. We have recruited additional Royal Bahamas Defense Force officers and purchased 4 new safe boats to patrol our waters. Our vessels are part of the sudden blockade we have formed with international partners to detect, intercept, undocumented vessels heading into our waters. We have recruited more Royal Bahamas Police Force officers, which will allow us to continue our current strategy of expanded patrols throughout New Providence. We are supporting the increase in manpower with expanded CCTV surveillance capabilities powered by artificial intelligence and facial recognition technology. In the upcoming year, we have allocated funds to strengthen our electronic monitoring capabilities, strengthen the CCTV network, expand the use of body cameras on police officers, add to the police vehicle fleet, and acquire new vessels for the Defense Force. We see these expenses as an investment in the safety of our people. Madam Speaker, we are introducing amendments to the Road Traffic Act, which will allow the Royal Bahamas Police Force to impound unlicensed or uninsured vehicles driven by persons who do not possess a valid driver's license or uninsured vehicle, as unlicensed vehicles are known to represent a substantial unlicensed uninsured vehicles are known to represent a substantial public health and crime risk. We also recognize the fact, moving on to another subject, we also recognize the fact that food security is also a national security. So we have allocated funds to expand programs like the Golden Yolk Egg Production Initiative as we take steps toward growing more of what we eat at home. As previously announced, the government, through its real estate investment vehicle, Ponciana, has completed the purchase of the former home of the Registrar General Department, 50 Shirley Street. The government is also finalizing the transfer from the National Insurance Board to Ponciana Rodney Bain building. The site of these 2 buildings will be the new judicial complex. The size of the investment is $70 million and will be raised by Ponciana independent of the government. Work on this project has already commenced. Demolition of the Rodney Bain building, which is the first phase of this project, is scheduled to commence in the early fall. Madam Speaker, in this budget, we have dedicated financial resources towards the creation of both a judicial and parliamentary authority. Additionally, funding has been set aside for the Attorney General's office to improve the operations of the Registrar General's Department and enhance its services for the community. Moreover, this budget includes allocation of funds for settlement of outstanding legal judgments, inclusive of land acquisition matters. In the upcoming budget cycle, funding has been set aside to improve the operations of the Registrar General's Department and enhance its services for the community. This budget also allocates funds for the modernization of the parliamentary registration system. Our younger citizens are our pride and joy. Over the past year, we began the process of a comprehensive research-based curriculum reform to modernize the curriculum and improve educational outcomes. We will see the results of this work soon. Meanwhile, our primary school students have been served more than 100,000 breakfasts, as I mentioned earlier. That's 100,000 times a child was able to focus on his or her teacher and the lesson properly without feeling the pangs of hunger. The program has been an extraordinary success, a hit with children, parents, and teachers, and administrators. And I'm very pleased to say that we are continuing the program in New Providence and expanding to ensure that every school on the Family Islands will now be included. Our increase in around-the-clock security services at our schools reflects our dedication to enhancing safety and security in our schools. school community. We are also investing $12 million for the University of the Bahamas to gain additional accreditations, as well as $8 million in upgrades to the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute to ensure that our technical and vocational students remain competitive at the tertiary level. This total of $20 million in funding will be sourced via external funding. Our National Youth Guard is training young Bahamian men and women to help with disaster response efforts while equipping them with the kind of in-demand skills that allowed over 85% of the participants of the first cohort to be gainfully employed. I'm proud of that. We just attended a beautiful and emotional graduation for the second cohort, and we are now recruiting the third cohort of this trailblazing program. Just a few weeks ago, we opened the Grand Bahama Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture office, which had been closed since Hurricane Dorian. And throughout the past year, we invested heavily in sports development across islands. We renovated the National Stadium and the Betty Kelly Kenning Aquatic Center to host sports tourism events like Grift and the World Relays. We also provided funds for 200 young people to receive training in digital skills to prepare them for emerging opportunities in that job market. And Speaker, we recognize the need for major investment in healthcare so that our public clinics and hospitals can meet the healthcare needs of the 21st century Bahamas. It has been more than 70 years since a new hospital was built in New Providence. Medicine has changed. Our population has grown. In this upcoming budget cycle, the work will begin for a new hospital in our nation's capital. We will also invest in renovations of Princess Margaret Hospital's accident emergency ward. In addition, work has begun on a new hospital in Grand Bahama and will continue at an accelerated pace. The hospital in Grand Bahama is out the ground. Public clinic renovations that were started this budget cycle will continue. During the current fiscal year, we began a major training and recruitment exercise to address the shortage of healthcare workers in our nation. We also funded salary and benefit increases for our nurses, as well as a number of promotions across the public health system. Funding for healthcare will be raised domestically through a commercial bank totaling $75 million. This will be targeted toward the ongoing development of the hospital in Grand Bahama and the renovations at Princess Margaret Hospital. Additionally, financing from the China Exim Bank will be allocated for the construction of the new hospital here in New Providence. In Grand Bahama, a number of important initiatives are underway. The Ministry of Grand Bahamas Restoration Village has assisted dozens of families with housing, employment support, counseling, and social services. The beautiful Grand Bahama initiative employed hundreds of people who completed more than 100 community projects. Many other efforts are underway, including the restoration of the YMCA grounds, the revitalization of the Grand Bahama Arts and Crafts Center at BIC, the renovation of the downtown farmers market, and works at the Grand Bahama Sports Complex, including the upcoming construction of a major world-class aquatic center. We also provided grants to 149 local micro and small businesses owners in Grand Bahama. This budget year, we expect to source $30 million to fund the purchase of the International Bazaar and the reopening of the West Sunrise Highway to accommodate the projected growth in tourism and economic activity over the next few years. Beyond preserving a significant landmark, this endeavor holds economic potential, as the revitalization of the bazaar can stimulate tourism, create jobs, and generate business activity. Similarly, reopening the West Sunrise Highway will improve connectivity and facilitate growth in Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker, yeah, we can do all that. During the current fiscal year, this topic of hurricanes, man. During the current fiscal year, we expedited recovery and rebuilding efforts in both our hurricane-hit northern islands. The West Grand Bahama Homeowners Assistance and Repair Program and the St. Bernard Partnership Project repaired well over 100 homes across the island of Grand Bahama. We know that it's urgent to pick up the pace when it comes to home repairs, and we are making plans to carry those out more efficiently so that we can reach more families. On Abaco, our collaboration with the Bahamas Conference of Methodist Church has rebuilt several homes. The Disaster Reconstruction Authority's state-of-the-art hurricane shelter and community center will be completed during the upcoming fiscal year. This shelter provides the surrounding Abaco community with programs and support throughout the year, and a place of refuge during hurricanes. Meanwhile, we have recruited record numbers of young Bahamians into the Nicolo P. Small Meteorology Cadet Program to expose them to the work of the Department of Meteorology and to pique their interest in pursuing a career. We have also expanded the number of weather stations throughout our islands to better monitor the weather and keep Bahamians safe. Madam Speaker, to support our economic growth, we are making key investments in infrastructure. Our efforts have included major waterworks to bring fresh, potable water to settlements in Harbour Island and mainland Eleuthera, as well as the extension of pipe water to areas of Exuma for the first time. Forbes Hill. Our islands seeing major waterworks include Andros, Cat Island, Moores Island, Grand Key, and Long Island. In the upcoming year, the Water and Sewage Corporation will access additional funding to implement water supply improvement and climate resilience initiatives throughout the nation. During the past year, roadworks were initiated throughout the archipelago, including 25 miles in New Providence, with additional work scheduled for the upcoming budget cycle. In the Family Islands, there was nearly $100 million in roadworks and infrastructure projects initiated, including the Red Bay settlements, roads, Long Island road repairs, Governor's Harbor road works, Great Harbor Key Airport civil works, and the Pelican Shores road repairs in Grand Bahama. You leave Cat Island out here. No, it's here. No, it's here. Just keep it. Other works throughout the Family Islands include works in South Andros, Cat Island, Crooked Island. The major Exuma road repairs is nearly 44% complete, with dozens of miles of road paved. Completion is set for mid-2025. New infrastructural projects for the coming fiscal year will include major roadworks, again in Exuma, Cat Island, Long Island, Eleuthera, and Abaco, implemented through public-private partnerships, financing, and through the use of the Family Island Development Fund. This is a major fund launched by this administration, which uses revenues generated in Family Islands to develop the Family Islands. In the upcoming budget, we are also making significant investments in our energy infrastructure. This will include exploring a major solar energy project on New Providence and micro solar grids throughout the Family Islands, as well as investments to facilitate a transition to LNG. These investments will result in significantly lower light bills and a more stable power supply. Madam Speaker, after nearly 3 years of work, we will soon launch our country's first comprehensive energy reform. The cost of electricity has been a huge expense, a huge burden to Bahamian families and businesses. We need system-wide change because in order to reduce the cost of electricity for consumers, we need a grid that is well-designed, effective, and efficient. We simply cannot lower costs or meet our full potential as a nation with an outdated, deteriorating energy grid. An aging 20th century grid cannot support a modern 21st century economy. And the reality is demand for energy is going up, while our grid is falling apart. We also need to add the capacity to integrate large-scale renewable energy. Solar energy has always been essential to our plans, but solar power is intermittent. That means the amount of solar power generated will fluctuate, will vary, depending on whether it's a sunny day or a cloudy day, daytime or nighttime. Using solar energy across archipelago requires careful planning and design and major new investment in grid flexibility and energy storage. Madam Speaker, BPL, the BPL we inherited from our predecessors was carrying a $500 million debt, $500 million. And experts have told us we need another $500 million in capital investments to rescue and then modernize our grid. $1 billion just to get BPL on track. I look forward to sharing plans for a new energy future for our country, including extensive use of solar power in New Providence and in the Family Island, LNG as a partner fuel, and a modern power grid shortly. Madam Speaker, this budget will allocate additional funding for mailboat contracts, as well as funds to support the expansion of mailboat routes. Further funding is allocated in the capital budget for the Port Department for the upgrade of navigation aids in the Bahamas, which also enhances safety for our seafarers. Additionally, funding has been provided to build a Bahamian workboat Class A for our Defense Force, which will allow them to fully participate in our national sport sailing. Housing. Madam Speaker, housing remains a priority for this government. In the upcoming budget, we are investing an additional $5 million for small home repairs. This is separate and apart from the funds allocated for the same purpose in urban renewal. We are exploring options for increased financing for housing for public servants in the Family Islands, including leveraging private sector funding to address the scarcity of accommodations driven by the increased investment in short-term vacation rentals in our Family Islands. We are expanding the Affordable Homes Program, and we have allocated funds to launch the Rent-to-Own initiative so that more Bahamians have access to home ownership. Madam Speaker, many components of this budget carry forward and build on the measures that we have implemented since we came into office, along with new measures that align with our meeting our challenges and furthering our aspirations. I look forward to opening the budget debate next week, when I can describe at greater length our investments in our people, our country, and our future. In closing, I want to share my optimism for the country we are building together. Optimism isn't complacency. I know how much work lies ahead, but rain is coming. It's going to be raining. And we know it won't always be smooth sailing. In a time of geopolitical conflict, in a new climate era of more intense hurricanes, where it's now been predicted that this year there'll be 17 to 25 named storms, 8 to 14 hurricanes, and 4 to 7 major hurricanes. That's what's predicted for this year. And these change. We can't say that's what we know now. And with the impact of the global inflation crisis continue to play out, we may face some rough waters ahead. But finally, our country is navigating forward in a sturdier boat and moving in the right direction. We are growing stronger, building both resilience and new opportunities. We are a country on the move. We are seeing the fruits of our labor, from the millions saved with the e-procurement platform to the gradual reduction in our debt and debt to GDP ratio, removal from the blacklistings, and overall economic development of our islands. We continue to strengthen revenue by reinforcing compliance and reform and introducing new mechanisms in this year's budget. We've also seen other aspects of fiscal consolidation with the introduction of the pension bills and draft legislation for qualified domestic minimum top-up tax. It's worth remembering how far we have come. In under 3 years, we went from the brink of risking harsh austerity measures to a new era of compassion and fiscal responsibility. Yes. We went from deserted, empty hotels to record-breaking numbers of visitors. Yes. We went from the worst economic contraction in our nation's history to robust economic growth. We went from shocking levels of unemployment to record job creation. Yes. We went from understaffed security forces to hundreds of new police and defense force officers. We went from despair to optimism. We are facing forward with renewed confidence and determination. We are strong enough to challenge the status quo on behalf of the Bahamian people. Yes. And we are changing lives. Yes. What a blessing to be involved in all of these endeavors. May God bless us all. And may God bless the people of the Bahamas. And may the opposition also pray for rain.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up.
Perfect timing, 1 o'clock on the dot. Perfect timing, 1 o'clock on the dot.
What's today's date?
29th.
Order the communication do lie on the table. Further communication?
No further communication, Madam Speaker, but I would move at this time, Madam Speaker, that we set the House to sit beyond 1 p.m. I think the clock there is wrong.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House proceed beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of this House will proceed beyond the 1 p.m. hour. Okay. Honourable members, are we now reverting back to laying of documents? Thank you, Honourable Member. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House Customs Management Amendment Regulations 2024.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
Oh, yeah.
Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the draft estimates of revenue and expenditure 2024-2025.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
It ain't showing this one. I write it inside, that's all.
Thank you. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers? You may proceed. Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Business License Amendment Regulations 2024.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents? The chair, you may proceed, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Value-Added Tax Amendment Regulations 2024.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents?
Madam Speaker, beg leave to lay on the table Parliamentary Service Act 2023 Appointed Day Notice 2024.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order the document be brought up. Let it rain. Let it rain. Thank you, Honor. It's my pleasure. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table Public Debt Management, Bahamas Registered Stock number 3, 2027, 2029, 2031, 2034, 2044, and 2054 directions 2024.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Fiscal Strategy Report 2024.
Thank you. Order the document be brought up.
That's it.
Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to lay on the table the following: the National Insurance Benefit Assistance Amendment Regulations 2024 and there's a resolution. Okay.
Order the document be brought up.
Benefit regulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Order that the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Elizabeth. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fort Charlotte.
The second, Madam Speaker, is the National Insurance Contribution Amendment Regulations 2024.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order the document be brought up.
That's this one.
Thank you. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of document by ministers? You make it. You may. Recognizes the Honorable Member for Elizabeth.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Commercial Recreational Watercraft Amendment Regulations 2024.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. Order the document due lie on the table. Further laying of documents? The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Consular Services Fees Amendment Regulation 2024.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document due lie on the table. Further laying of documents?
I beg leave, Madam Speaker, to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment to First Schedule Order 2024.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents?
I beg leave to lay on the table of the House, Madam Speaker, a copy of the Price Control General Amendment Number 5 Regulation 2024.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. Order the document to lie on the table. Further lay of documents?
Madam Speaker, I finally beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Public Holidays with Monday 2024 Opening of Stores Notice 2024.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents?
No further laying of documents.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We will now proceed down the order of business. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards deferring the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year commencing 1st of July 2024 and ending the 30th of June 2025.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
24.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year commencing 1st July 2024 and ending 30th of June 2025. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year commencing 1st of July 2024 and ending 30th of June 2025.
Thank you. For the first readings, you may proceed, Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act for the appropriation of the sum of $344,524,525 for and towards deferring the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of Bahamas for capital developments for the financial year ending 30th June 2025.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act for the appropriation of the sum of $344,524,525 for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for capital development for the financial year ending 30th June 2025. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act for the appropriation of the sum of $344,524,500.25. For and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of Bahamas for capital development for the financial year ending 30th of June 2025.
Thank you. Further first readings?
First reading. Yeah.
You may proceed, Honorable Member.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Business License Act.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? Second. Thank you, Honorable Member. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Business License Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Business License Act.
Thank you. For the first readings? You may continue on.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Real Property Tax Act.
Second.
Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Real Property Tax Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Real Property Tax Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to have introduced and read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Public Finance Management Act.
Second.
Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. It's moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Public Finance Management Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Public Finance Management Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill to amend the Customs Management Act.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Customs Management Act. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Customs Management Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
Thank you, honorable. Thank you, honorable members. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill to provide for the imposition of stamp duty, to repeal the Stamp Act 1925, and for connected purposes.
Second.
The bill. Thank you, Honorable Member. Ordered the document be brought up. See. Okay. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill to provide for the imposition of stamp duty to repeal the Stamp Act 1925 and for connected matters. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to provide for the imposition of stamp duty to repeal the Stamp Act 1925 and for connected matters.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill to amend the Tariff Act.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Tariff Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Tariff Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill to amend the Excise Bill, Excise Act.
Thank you, honorable member. Order. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Excise Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Excise Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill to amend the Tax Appeal Commission Act.
Thank you, honorable member. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, honorable members. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Tax Appeal Commission Act 2020. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Tax Appeal Commission Act 2020.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill to amend the International Persons Landing Holdings Act.
Second.
Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the International Persons Land Holding Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the International Persons Land Holding Act.
Thank you. For the first readings? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fort Charlotte.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act.
Thank you, honorable member.
Second.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the National Insurance Act to provide protection, recovery, and additional requirements of board members.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the National Insurance Act to provide for protection, recovery, and additional requirements of board members. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the National Insurance Act to provide for protection, recovery, and additional requirements of board members.
Thank you. For the first readings? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Commercial Recreational Watercraft Act.
Thank you, honorable member. Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Commercial Recreational Watercraft Act, Chapters 278A. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Commercial Recreational Watercraft Act, Chapter 278A.
Thank you. For the first readings, you may proceed, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Port Authorities Act.
Thank you, Honor. Is there a seconder? Second. Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Port Authorities Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
Port Authorities. A bill for an act to amend the Port Authorities Act.
Thank you. For the first readings, you may continue, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Road Traffic Act.
Thank you, honorable member. Is there a seconder? Second. Thank you, honorable member. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Road Traffic Act, Chapter 220. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Road Traffic Act, Chapter 220.
Thank you. For the first readings, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Agricultural Manufacturers Act.
Second.
Thank you, honorable members. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Agricultural Manufacturers Act, Chapter 243. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Agricultural Manufactories Act, Chapter 243.
Thank you. For the first readings, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act.
Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Ministries of Foreign Affairs Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the National Insurance Chronic Disease Prescription Drug Fund Act.
Thank you, honorable members. Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the National Insurance Chronic Diseases Prescription Drug Fund Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the National Insurance Chronic Diseases Prescription Drugs Fund Act.
Thank you. For the first reading?
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Industries Encouragement Act.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable members. Order the document be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time. A bill for an act to amend the Industries Encouragement Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Industries Encouragement Act.
Thank you. For the first reading?
For the first reading.
Thank you, honorable member. Second reading, Committee of Bills.
No second readings.
Thank you, honorable member. Committee of the Whole House. Third reading and passing of bills. Consideration of Senate's amendments. Resolutions. Member statements. Appointment of select committees. Instructions to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to give notice at the next sitting. I expect we'll be doing this at the next sitting. Several resolutions tied to the money bills percentage. I'll read just the first. I have three resolutions. I have three, yeah. And Minister has two. The first resolution, Madam Speaker, I'll just read the first paragraph and the last. Whereas Article 129(1) of the Constitution requires the Minister of Finance before the end of each financial year the cost to be prepared annual estimates of revenue and expenditure for public services during the succeeding financial year, which shall be laid before the House of Assembly, which estimates have been laid before the House of Assembly. Now therefore be it resolved that this House authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the sum of $37,015,504 in such currency as the Minister may determine, authorizes the Minister to borrow by way of government loan agreements or line of credit agreement, issuing securities, and creating any other debt instrument in local or any foreign currency. Approves the proceeds of the said borrowing being used for the purposes of deferring expenditure in the 2024-25 estimates of revenue and expenditure in excess of revenue.
Order that the notice be brought up. Thank you. Order that the notice to lie on the table. Further notices?
Speaker, I beg leave to introduce the resolution, reading the first and last paragraphs. Whereas Article 129(1) of the Constitution requires the Minister of Finance before the end of each fiscal financial year to cause to be prepared annual estimates of revenue and expenditure for public services during the succeeding financial year, which shall be laid before the House of Assembly, and which estimates have been laid before the House of Assembly. Now therefore be it resolved that this House authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the sum of $33 million in such currency as the Minister may determine, authorize the Minister to borrow by way of government loan agreements or line of credit agreement, issuing its securities and creating any other debt instrument in local or any foreign currency. Approves the proceeds of this borrowing being used for the purposes of deferring expenditure in 2023-24 estimates of revenue and expenditure in excess of revenue.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the notice be brought up. Order the notice to lie on the table. Further notices?
Yep. Yeah. Madam Speaker, I beg leave to give notice of the resolution to be debated. This resolution, whereas the Airport Authority is a body corporate established pursuant to Section 3 of the Airport Authority Act, revised statute laws of the Colony of the Bahamas, and whereas the Board of Directors of the Southern Fund for Development approved in principle 2 loans totaling $125 million to assist with the development and rehabilitations of airports on the islands of Exuma and North Eleuthera. Now therefore be it resolved that this House approves the government entering into a guarantee agreement with Southern Fund for Development, guaranteeing the repayment of all sums that may become due and payable in respect of the principal interest by Airport Authority and the loan agreements for the total sum of $25 million for the development and rehabilitation of airports in Exuma and North Eleuthera.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the notice be brought up. Order the notice to lie on the table. Further notices for future meeting? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Fort Charlotte.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to give notice of the following. A resolution approving the National Insurance Benefit and Assistance Amendment Regulations 2024.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order the notice be brought up.
Thank you.
Order the notice to lie on the table. Further notices? You may continue, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to give notice of the following. A resolution approving the National Insurance Contributions Amendment Regulations 2024.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the notice be brought up. Order that notice do lie on the table. Further notices for future meetings?
Further notices in the name of the government.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
And I renew all notices in the name of the opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Adjournment?
Madam Speaker, oh, sorry.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just wish to give the House notice that the regulations require the affirmative approval of the House and the Senate. And even though the resolutions have been laid separately, they should be part of the regulations that were laid at the outset, when those documents were laid.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Honorable Member. We agree?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
You in agreement? Okay, thank you, Honorable Member. Adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House on its rising do adjourn to Wednesday, the 5th of June at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the House at its rising do adjourn to Wednesday, 5th of June, 2024 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Final adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I now move that the House do adjourn to Wednesday, the 5th of June at 10 a.m.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn to Wednesday, 5th of June, 2024 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House now stands adjourned to Wednesday, 5th of June, 2024 at 10 a.m. All right.